The federal government says rapper Pooh Shiesty is simply too dangerous to be out on bond.
Gucci Mane went public with footage of Pooh Shiesty robbing him. And if you think you know what happened between these two, you do not have the full picture yet. Because this is not just about a beef, a diss track, or an internet rumor. There is actual footage, there are federal charges, and Gucci Mane is cooperating with the government to make sure Pooh Shiesty never sees the outside of a prison again. His own security guard wrote a letter to the judge specifically asking that Shiesty not be given bond. Let that register for a second. The man who signed Pooh Shiesty, who held his spot on the label while he was locked up, who publicly kept him on the roster when everyone else got dropped. That same man is now sitting on the other side of a federal case, and the tape he has could be what sends Shiesty away for life. Federal kidnapping charges, a weapon allegedly pointed at Gucci's face, and Shiesty was still on supervised release from his last conviction when this allegedly went down. One charge alone carries a potential life sentence, and the people closest to this case are not treating it like a rap beef. They are treating it like the end. Now, behind that headline is a story that goes so much deeper than what most people cover. We went through the federal criminal complaint, the FBI affidavit, the court filings, the detention hearing transcripts, and the full documented timeline of how Gucci Mane and Pooh Shiesty went from one of the most promising partnerships in Southern rap to a federal kidnapping case with a potential life sentence on the table. And trust us, the real story hits different. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. If you are new here, we do not do surface level breakdowns on this channel. We go deep, we go documented, and we make sure every layer of the story gets its proper treatment. Now the real story is actually way deeper than the headline, because what Gucci did, how the evidence came out, and what the feds say happened inside that studio, that is the part nobody fully explained. So let us go back to where Pooh Shiesty started. Lontrell Donnell Williams Jr. was born on November 8, 1999 in Memphis, Tennessee. Now for those who might not know the culture, Memphis rap has always had its own DNA. Gritty, stripped back, street-rooted, with a rawness that does not apologize for itself. This is the city that gave us 3 6 Mafia, Yo Gotti, Young Dolph. Artists who came up making music that felt less like performance and more like testimony. And Shiesty fit that mold perfectly from the jump. He started putting out music independently in 2019, with his debut single Hell Night generating real attention locally and across the South. He was building organically, single by single, without the machinery of a major label behind him. But the voice was undeniable. The energy was undeniable. And it was not long before somebody with major pull noticed. That somebody was Radric Atlantic Davis. You know him as Gucci Mane, Guwap, Wap, one of the founding fathers of trap music. A man who in the mid-2000s was helping create the sonic blueprint that would eventually influence an entire generation of rappers. Gucci had already launched and developed careers including Young Thug, and had earned a Grammy nomination for his appearance on Lizzo's track, Exactly How I Feel. He is one of the figures who literally built the sound that made Atlanta the capital of rap. And in 2020, after years of rebuilding his own brand following personal and legal setbacks of his own, Gucci was running 1017 Records, now rebranded as the New 1017, and was actively looking for the next generation of talent to anchor the imprint. In April 2020, Gucci Mane signed Pooh Shiesty to a joint venture deal with 1017 Records and Atlantic Records. According to reporting from Billboard, the deal was said to be worth $10 million. Now let me break down for y'all what that actually means for a rapper who had been grinding independently out of Memphis. That was not just a business deal, that was a stamp. A cosign from one of the most respected names in Southern rap, paired with the distribution power of one of the biggest labels in the world. Shiesty himself spoke about why he chose Gucci's imprint, saying, "I don't know who else I would go to. Ain't nobody was coming at me like WAP. It just made perfect sense." They celebrated the signing by releasing a collaborative single together. They were out there presenting a mentor-protege dynamic to the world. And for a minute, it felt like the beginning of something historic. The momentum from that signing was immediate. Gucci started putting Shiesty on key 1017 projects, including So Icy Summer, a compilation that dropped in July 2020 and introduced Shiesty to a national audience. Collaborations like Still Remember and Who Is Him with Gucci began stacking up. Then on November 6, 2020, Shiesty released Back in Blood featuring Lil Durk. That record became his highest charting solo moment up to that point, peaking at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. He also appeared on Spot'em Got'em's Beatbox 2 remix, which peaked at number 12 on the same chart. Within less than a year of signing, Pooh Shiesty was already placing records inside the top 15 of the biggest singles chart in the world. He was named an XXL freshman. He was named Billboard's Hip Hop Rookie of the Month. The machine was working, and Shiesty was the engine. Then came February 5th, 2021, Shiesty Season. His debut mixtape dropped as a 17-track project featuring Lil Durk, Gucci Mane, Big 30, 21 Savage, and more. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 62,000 album equivalent units in its opening week. That is not a soft debut. That is a statement. That is the kind of first project performance that most rappers dream about their entire careers and never reach. Gucci had bet on a winner, and Shiesty had delivered. But here is where it gets real spicy. Because in October 2020, even before the mixtape dropped, Shiesty had been arrested in connection with a shooting in Bay Harbor Islands, Florida, at a property called the Landon Hotel. He was initially released from custody, and things kept moving. Then in June 2021, he was arrested again, this time in connection with a Memorial Day weekend shooting at a strip club in Miami-Dade County. And later that same month, he was formally indicted on 4 counts related to the October 2020 shooting. The federal charges described a situation in which prosecutors alleged that Shiesty and co-conspirators arrived to purchase marijuana, codeine, and sneakers from 2 individuals. During that meetup, the feds said a member of his group produced a weapon and 2 victims were shot. Both survived. Now check it. Investigators later tied Shiesty to the scene through what has to be one of the most internet-era pieces of evidence imaginable, his own Instagram. Investigators discovered that a Louis Vuitton bag found in the parking lot of the Landon Hotel was the same one Shiesty had been posting on his social media. And then it got even more specific. Some of the $100 bills in that bag had the same serial numbers as bills visible in close-up shots Shiesty had posted online. His own flex post helped place him at the scene. That is some real poetic irony right there. Now throughout 2021 and early 2022, the case evolved significantly. By the time Shiesty entered a guilty plea in January 2022, the charges had been narrowed down to a single count: conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of crimes of violence and drug trafficking. As part of the plea deal, prosecutors dropped 3 other charges, including one that had carried a potential life sentence. On April 20th, 2022, U.S. District Judge Kevin Michael Moore sentenced Lontrell Williams Jr. to 63 months in federal prison, 5 years and 3 months, along with 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay $35,000 in restitution. His attorney Bradford Cohen noted after the sentencing that Shiesty was happy the judge listened to our argument, and that both attorney and client were pleased with the outcome given the maximum exposure they had been facing. At the time of sentencing, Shiesty was 22 years old, and Shiesty Season had peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200. He was in the middle of one of the most promising rookie runs in modern rap, and then it all stopped. The album momentum, the feature placements, the potential sophomore project that would have cemented his standing. All of it paused because of decisions made outside the studio. But here is where it gets interesting. During his absence, Gucci Mane made a significant public statement about the 1017 roster. In a video posted around October 2024, Gucci announced that he was releasing nearly his entire artist roster, citing profit and loss decisions. But notably, he made a point of keeping 2 names, Fugiano and Pooh Shiesty. Even with Shiesty locked up and his release date roughly 18 months away at that point, Gucci publicly held that spot. He confirmed again to TMZ in 2025 that Shiesty remains signed. Now for y'all who know how the industry works, that kind of loyalty from a label boss toward an incarcerated artist is genuinely rare. Most labels move on, most rosters get restructured, and the artist coming home finds the door closed. Gucci kept it open. And in retrospect, that makes what allegedly came next even more difficult to process. Shiesty was released early from federal prison on October 6, 2025, having served approximately 3 years of his sentence under the First Step Act, a 2018 bipartisan criminal justice reform law that allows federal inmates to earn credits toward early release through good behavior and program participation. His original projected release date had been April 11, 2026, meaning the early release shaved roughly 6 months off his time. His attorney Bradford Cohen released a statement saying he was elated that Shiesty had come home, and that he believed it was just the beginning of his second act. And for a moment, it really looked like that. On December 12, 2025, Pooh Shiesty dropped FDO, his first post-prison single. The song debuted at number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100 and shot to number 1 on both Billboard's Hot R&B Hip-Hop Songs and Hot Rap Songs charts. Real talk, a comeback track reaching number 1 on the rap chart after 3 years away from the game is not just a strong showing. It is a signal that the audience had waited, that they were ready, that despite everything, the commercial pull was still there. The comeback narrative was writing itself, and the industry was watching. But here is where the story gets deeper than just a feel-good return, because underneath that momentum, something else was reportedly building. According to a federal criminal affidavit filed by FBI agent Brittany Garcia, Shiesty was dissatisfied with the terms of his existing recording contract with 1017 Records. Public reporting from Complex and other outlets also indicated that around this time, Yo Gotti and his CMG label had expressed interest in signing Shiesty, which would have meant directly competing with Gucci Mane for the rapper's services. Now let me break down why that matters. The relationship between Gotti and Gucci has historically been complicated going back years. Two powerful Southern label bosses with overlapping rosters and competing interests. So the idea of Shiesty potentially jumping from 1017 to CMG was not just a business transaction. It was loaded with history. And it is in that context, contract frustration, competing label interest, and the weight of a deal signed 6 years earlier under very different circumstances, that prosecutors say the events of January 10th, 2026 were set in motion. So check it. According to federal court documents, Shiesty arranged a meeting with Gucci Mane and others to take place at a recording studio on Dallas Parkway. The stated purpose was to discuss the terms of his recording contract with 1017 Records. Gucci Mane, referred to in the federal complaint only as RD, traveled to Dallas along with 2 other individuals described as music industry professionals. These 3 men flew into the city on a Saturday afternoon, believing they were walking into a business meeting. What prosecutors allege happened instead is the kind of thing that reads more like a movie than a real event. According to the affidavit, once the 3 victims entered the studio, Shiesty asked to speak with the label owner privately in a recording room. Gucci Mane entered that room with Shiesty, along with Shiesty's father, Lontrell Williams Sr., and fellow Memphis rapper Rodney Wright Jr., known as Big 30. What was described as a private business conversation then allegedly took a violent turn. Prosecutors say Shiesty produced contract termination paperwork and told the label owner to sign it. When the label owner refused, Shiesty allegedly reached into a bag and pulled out a black AK-style pistol, pointing it directly at Gucci Mane and demanding he sign. According to the affidavit, he did sign. And once he had, Shiesty allegedly took his wedding ring, watch, earrings, and cash. The real kicker, though, is what was happening simultaneously on the other side of that studio door. While Gucci was in that recording room, the other defendants allegedly produced firearms and moved against the 2 remaining victims outside. One victim, identified in court documents only as MM, was choked from behind to the point of near unconsciousness and had a Rolex watch, a Louis Vuitton bag, and other items stolen. Another victim was pushed onto a couch and robbed of his wallet and jewelry. Big 30, according to prosecutors, physically blocked the studio door with his body to prevent anyone from escaping. And according to the complaint, at some point during the confrontation, the victims believed they might be killed. Now this is where we got to address the evidence, because this is where the prosecution's case gets very specific. The electronic monitoring data from Shiesty's ankle bracelet, which he was still wearing as a condition of his supervised release from the 2022 conviction, showed him at the studio location on January 10th, directly contradicting any claim that he was not present. For y'all who might not know, when you are on home confinement after a federal sentence, that ankle monitor is pinging your location constantly. There is no window to say you were somewhere else. Cell phone records and license plate reader data also corroborated that several defendants had traveled together from Memphis to Dallas in the days leading up to the incident and stayed at a Dallas hotel after it was over. Surveillance footage from the studio and surrounding businesses was cited in the complaint. Fingerprint evidence recovered from items inside the studio, including red plastic cups, reportedly tied multiple defendants to the scene, and prosecutors also pointed to social media posts made by several defendants in the hours and days after the incident, where they were allegedly seen displaying large amounts of cash and jewelry believed to have been taken in the robbery. But this is where the story gets even more calculated. The affidavit states that Shiesty's father, Lontrell Williams Sr., also a named defendant, visited a Staples store hours before the meeting, where investigators believe the contract release documents used in the alleged extortion were printed. The implication being that the termination paperwork was prepared in advance, that the entire meeting was constructed from the beginning as a setup. This was not a confrontation that escalated. According to prosecutors, it was planned. Now let's talk about Big 30 specifically, because his role goes deeper than just being a co-defendant. Rodney Wright Jr. has been Shiesty's closest musical collaborator going back to their independent Memphis days. Their 2019 debut, Hell Night, was the record that started everything for both of them. According to prosecutors, Big 30's alleged role in the Dallas studio was not passive. The affidavit says he physically handed Shiesty the bag containing the AK-style pistol, filmed Gucci Mane on his cell phone as he was allegedly forced to sign the contract release under duress, and barricaded the studio door with his body to prevent anyone from escaping. When he was arrested, law enforcement reportedly found firearms in his vehicle. The career implications for him are just as severe as for Shiesty. In April 2026, prosecutors filed a motion arguing Big 30 should remain detained, specifically because he was on the verge of signing a 7-figure recording deal, framing that contract not as a stabilizing factor but as a flight risk. A Tennessee judge initially granted him a $100,000 bond, but Texas District Court Judge Ed Kinkead immediately stayed that order. The deal that should have been the biggest moment of his career became a document prosecutors used against him in a detention brief. On April 2nd and 3, 2026, 8 of the 9 defendants were arrested across Dallas, Memphis, and Nashville. The 9th was still being sought at the time. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas, led by Ryan Raybould, held a press conference announcing the charges. Raybould called Shiesty the ringleader of the conspiracy and described what allegedly happened plainly. The victims in this case came to Dallas to conduct legitimate business, and they were met with firearms and violence. On April 28th, a federal grand jury returned an 18-page formal indictment, unsealed shortly after, charging all 9 defendants. The indictment included 5 counts. Count 1 charging conspiracy to commit kidnapping spanning early January through January 13, 2026. Counts 2 through 4 charging substantive kidnapping and extortion, including aiding and abetting liability. And count 5 charging 4 of the co-defendants with transporting stolen goods across state lines. The government also sought forfeiture of all proceeds and assets tied to the alleged offenses. All 9 defendants face up to life imprisonment if convicted on the kidnapping conspiracy count alone. On April 8th and 9, 2026, a detention hearing was held before U.S. Magistrate Judge Renee Harris Tolliver in Dallas. This is where both sides laid out their arguments publicly for the first time, and it is worth breaking down what each side is actually working with. On the prosecution side, the ankle monitor data placing Shiesty at the scene, the Staples receipt tied to his father, the social media posts showing stolen jewelry, the license plate reader data showing the group traveling from Memphis to Dallas together, fingerprint evidence from the studio, and the fact that Shiesty was actively violating the terms of his supervised release from his 2022 conviction at the time. Prosecutors also noted that Gucci Mane's wedding ring, watch, and earrings were taken, personal items, not just cash, which adds a layer of premeditated humiliation to the alleged robbery that is hard to explain away as a misunderstanding. On the defense side, the arguments are focused on the gaps. The FBI admitted during the hearing that they had not directly interviewed Gucci Mane or the other victims at the time of the arrest, relying instead on statements given to Dallas police at the scene. Shiesty's attorneys called it a he said type of case, and flagged the 3-month delay between the January incident and the April arrest as a significant procedural concern. The defense also pointed out that the contract document prosecutors described as the centerpiece of the extortion, the signed release from 1017 Records, had not been recovered or produced in court at the time of the detention hearing. No contract, no video of the alleged signing, and no direct FBI interviews with the primary victim. Those are real holes that the defense will lean on hard at trial. Williams was seen repeatedly shaking his head during testimony, but Judge Tolliver ordered him to remain in custody regardless, stating plainly, "I find that the weight of the evidence against you is strong." Shiesty was transferred to the Kaufman County Jail in mid-April. At the end of April, he filed a motion requesting new counsel, which was granted. In early May 2026, he entered a plea of not guilty to all counts. By mid-May, a trial date had been set, July 6, 2026, in federal court in Dallas, with a final pretrial conference scheduled for July 1st. As of the writing of this script, the case is in pretrial status, with all 9 defendants facing the same charges and the same legal standard of innocent until proven guilty. Now let me break down what the realistic outcomes look like going into that July trial. Federal kidnapping convictions carry some of the heaviest sentencing exposure in the entire federal code. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1201, a conviction can result in life in prison, and if prosecutors argue victims were not released unharmed, a mandatory minimum of 20 years can apply. Beyond that, Shiesty is also facing potential supervised release violations from his 2022 Florida conviction, meaning any new sentence could run consecutively on top of whatever the court already imposed, not alongside it. For Big 30, the exposure is identical. If the defense succeeds in creating reasonable doubt, particularly around the missing contract document, the delayed arrests, and the lack of direct FBI interviews with the primary victim, an acquittal or hung jury is procedurally possible. But federal conviction rates in the United States consistently run above 85%, and cases built on electronic monitoring data, fingerprints, surveillance footage, and social media evidence are difficult to overcome at trial. The government's case has real gaps, but it also has multiple independent layers of documented evidence. That is the reality Shiesty's new legal team is walking into on July 6. Now let's talk about Gucci Mane's public response, because this is actually where the internet narrative that drove that headline took on so much momentum. Gucci Mane did not hold a press conference. He did not drop a YouTube video. He did not release surveillance footage personally. What he did do was release a song. On April 10th, 2026, Gucci dropped a track called Crash Dummy, produced by Zaytoven, and the lyrics spoke directly to the emotional weight of being set up by someone in your inner circle. Without naming Shiesty explicitly, the references were unmistakable. Lines about walking into a room and feeling betrayal forming around him, about people smiling in your face before stabbing you in the back, a line about not biting the hand that feeds you, and perhaps most pointed of all, a line that roughly translates to, "After everything I did for you, you were still signed to me." That last line hit differently because it was not just emotional. It was a direct reference to the documented business relationship that allegedly sat at the center of everything. That song is where the online narrative crystallized. Commentary channels picked it up. Clips were reposted. Captions started describing Gucci as revealing everything and dropping the tape. The word tape started circulating as shorthand for both the song and the idea of footage, which blurred what Gucci actually did. Drop a diss track with the notion that he had personally exposed damning video evidence. That is how the headline you clicked on came to exist. The internet compressed a criminal complaint, a detention hearing, a diss track, and 5 years of professional history into a single sentence. And then that sentence traveled faster than any of the actual details could follow. Now, this ain't just about the internet getting it wrong. This is about something much deeper. Because the Gucci Shiesty story, it was a mentorship story. And in hip-hop, that dynamic carries real weight. A cosign from someone like Gucci Mane is not just a business transaction. It is a vouching. It is someone putting their name and credibility behind yours and telling the entire industry this person is worth betting on. Gucci kept Shiesty on the 1017 roster even as nearly every other artist was dropped. He publicly defended that business relationship even while Shiesty was serving federal time. And then, if the allegations are accurate, the first major move Shiesty made after coming home was to fly to Dallas and allegedly put a gun in that same man's face over a contract dispute. If true, that is not just a crime. It is a complete inversion of everything a cosign is supposed to mean. The real kicker, though, is the timing. Shiesty walked out of federal prison in October 2025, having already served time on a gun conspiracy conviction. He was on home confinement. He had an ankle monitor. He had conditions on his release that were explicit. No new federal offenses, no firearms. And if the government's version of events is accurate, he allegedly violated every single one of those conditions within about 3 months of getting home. The comeback single had just gone #1. The industry was ready to welcome him back. And allegedly, none of that was enough. And on a purely business level, the implications are staggering. Label deals, touring schedules, a long-delayed sophomore album, all of it was on the table for Shiesty. A second chapter that outperforms the first is rare, but his numbers after release suggested it was possible. All of that is now on pause, pending a federal kidnapping trial with a potential life sentence attached. For Gucci Mane and 1017 Records, the contract Shiesty allegedly tried to force his way out of is still in legal limbo. There are broader questions about what this signals to other artists and potential signings going forward. A mentor's reputation is partly built on the outcomes of the people he bets on. When a bet turns into something like this, that equation gets complicated in ways no song or legal filing can fully untangle. Rap music has always wrestled with the tension between the persona an artist projects and the reality of the decisions they make. Pooh Shiesty's image was built on fearless authenticity, the balaclava, the Memphis aggression, the refusal to soften the edges. But there is a difference between an image and a life, between what moves units and what determines outcomes. And when those two things collapse into each other in a federal courtroom, the consequences are real in a way that streaming numbers cannot contain. At the end of the day, this story is not finished. The trial is set for July 2026. The defense has identified gaps in the government's case. Shiesty has pleaded not guilty. Big 30 and the other defendants face their own proceedings. Until a jury renders a verdict, the full legal truth of what happened on January 10th in that Dallas recording studio is still being determined by a process that moves on its own timeline, regardless of what the internet decided 2 days after the arrest. But what we can say with certainty right now is this: the relationship between Gucci Mane and Pooh Shiesty, one of the most promising mentor-protege dynamics in recent Southern rap, has ended in the most dramatic, documented, and publicly devastating way imaginable. A man who held a spot on a label roster for a young rapper during 3 years of federal incarceration ended up, according to prosecutors, with a gun pointed at him by that same rapper in a Dallas recording studio. And the song Gucci released in the aftermath speaks not in the language of a press release or a social media post, but in the language that rap artists have always used when words are the only instrument they have left. Bars, a beat, and the truth of what happened when the room went quiet and nobody was smiling anymore. The real question now is what July brings. When this thing goes to a jury, every piece of that evidence, the ankle monitor data, the surveillance footage, the social media posts, the Staples receipt, is laid out in a federal courtroom. And the verdict that comes out of that room writes the final chapter of one of the most unbelievable stories in recent rap history. We will be breaking down every development as it happens. So if you are not subscribed, now is the time. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think actually went down in that studio? And what does this say about the price of loyalty in this industry? We will see you in the next one.